Right, everyone. Thank you for joining us. It's 12:01, getting the last couple in from the waiting room, but I think we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you all for joining us today. This is the Dynamics of Donor Development series. My name is Carly Houchin. I work as the Director of Health Systems at the Sunflower Foundation, and we're really happy to have you with us here today. If this is the first session that you're joining in the series, welcome. The good news is there's a lot of other very rich content for you to explore from the previous four sessions in this series. The recordings are available for the four previous sessions out on the Sunflower Foundation website. We can drop a link to those resources here in the chat in just a moment. But this journey started all the way back with the first session on creating a culture of philanthropy. Then we had another great conversation on crafting a case for support. Had a really dynamic discussion about donor advised funds. And then just last week, we spent time talking about discovery conversations and corporate development. In just a few minutes, I'll turn it over to our subject matter experts from Brad Cecil and Associates to get into today's topic on prospect research for small shops. Before we do that, though, and frankly, to vamp for a little bit while people are still rolling in from the waiting room, going to take care of just a few housekeeping items. If you're able, please navigate to the chat function. And if you could add your name, organization, and where you're joining from, that would be super helpful for us just to get a sense of who's in the room and where you're calling in from. If you'd like to, also feel free to add. I think sometimes it's fun and challenging to try and get a one-word description, one word that comes to mind when you think about growing the donor development strategy for your organization. Just kind of a sentiment check. Is donor development something that is scary? Hopefully not anymore. Is it something you're excited to jump into, or I don't know, whatever sentiment comes to mind, but describing that in one word would be great to add to the chat if you're interested to do so. As you found the chat, please feel free to use that throughout our session today. We're kind of warming it up now, so you know where to find it when you have questions. We'll use that to capture questions for the presenters throughout today's conversation, and we'll make sure those get answered before we conclude our time here. As a reminder, this session will go to 1:15 today, so if any of you have meetings at the top of the hour, no worries. We are again recording this session, and we'll post the recording and the resources shared online as well, and we'll send those out via email to those who have registered. My last kind of housekeeping reminder before we turn it over to Vickie and Brad to get into today's topic is one final reminder that the Donor Development Accelerator grants are now open from the Sunflower Foundation. And through this grant opportunity, we're really looking to accelerate the knowledge that you've gained from this series and put it into action. So really the intent is to provide grants that would represent a flexible opportunity to be experimental with the strategies and tactics that Vickie and Brad have outlined over the course of these 5 sessions. So anticipated awards will be up to $5,000 per organization. And very important to note, those applications are due next Tuesday, May 5th. So quite a few of you have started those applications. We're excited to see those in the grant management system, but want to make sure to say and say again so you can circle on your calendar. Those are due next week, next Tuesday, May 5th in the Sunflower Foundation grant management system. We intend to then work promptly through a review of those, and we'll get funding announcements out on or before June 30th. If you have questions about this funding opportunity or the series itself, feel free to email me directly. If you have that saved from my email saved from previous webinars, or if you contact programs@sunflowerfoundation.org, that'll go to our whole team, and we'll triage your question and track down an answer. We've shared this before, but just wanted to offer a couple of reminders again about how accelerator grants could best be used to advance this work. Really want to provide opportunities for you to pilot new strategies or take your donor development approach to the next level. So whether that's developing communication tools, implementing new data strategies around your donor development approach for your organization, or really any of the opportunities listed on the left-hand side of the screen. Those are all great fits. But if you have questions about specifics, again, that programs@sunflowerfoundation.org email is a great way to get in touch with us. Just as a reminder, we've covered these before, but these grants are not intended for general operating support or for programmatic expenses. They're not intended to be a contribution directly to a major giving or capital campaign, and of course won't be able to support activities that are generally deemed ineligible for Sunflower Foundation funding. Again, should be relatively straightforward. Really looking to take the topics in this series and give you grant support to be experimental and innovative in trying them out. Hope that is an opportunity that you are interested in. You know where to find us if there's questions. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to our friends from Brad, Cecil and Associates to get into today's topic on prospect research for small shops. Vickie, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Carly. And thank you all for joining. I see a lot of familiar names that are popping up in the list of participants. So I really have enjoyed spending this time together with you all over it's not just 5 weeks. We've been doing this for quite a while together. And it's been a pleasure for me and Brad to really sit down and think about how we can help organizations to build capacity and improve efficiency. That's really what we have been focusing on in all of these sessions that we've been sharing with you. And Carly already went through the journey that we've been on together. So today's topic is prospect research for small shops. And this is something that our team spends so much time doing. We are doing prospect research every single day. And so what we're hoping to do today is give you some of our best practices and give you tools that you can actually implement today that don't require a subscription, don't require a ton of training, but just really practical lessons that you can implement and hope that they feel like an efficient use of your time so that you don't feel bogged down by the research process, because it can feel very overwhelming at times. So we're going to break it down by individual donor types today. And the idea of having prospect research at the end of this session is that we've gone through a lot of sophisticated strategies and tasks through our time together. Prospect research is really the last thing that needs to be done before you're ready to go meet with a prospective donor and start building up those relationships that we've been talking about. So I'm going to get to our slides, and I'm so glad that my partner in crime is joining today. There's so much to be learned from Brad and his experience. He's been running this agency for almost 30 years, but has a whole career before that as well in nonprofit fundraising. And so I'm going to turn it over to Brad to get us started today in our conversation about prospect research.
Yeah, and it's thank you, Vickie and Carly and Kelly and the team. Honored to be part of this webinar for this series. It's very exciting to really go through the process of doing donor development, just because of the fact it's such a wonderful task. You know, I learned early on that donor development really is a lot of art and a lot of science and a lot of work. Early on, when I got into this business, believe it or not, I had to do most of my research at the library. I used to go to the library on a regular basis to read through periodicals, to look at foundation directories and all these things. And today we have this wonderful tool called the internet. But the interesting thing is we're also shifting right now as we speak from a world that was largely focused on keywords to a world that's now focused on AI. And there's a very different process going even through that of learning how to do research using AI instead of just searching on keywords and those type of things. So we'll get into that just a little bit. We won't go through all the details of this, but it's wonderful to be a part of this journey for this long period of time, just to see how things have changed and how important it is to stay up with the tools that we have available to us. Just a quick reminder that everything that we share with you, this is the beautiful part of it. It's all public information. It's not private or information that's reserved just to a handful of people. It's largely available to all of us, and so we have to do the work of going through it and understanding it. But we have to make sure that we know that this is all public information for us. What you see on the screen right now is the source of contributions from Giving USA. If you don't have a subscription to that, this may be a little bit proprietary, but usually this is published at no cost as well. But this was an eye-opening thing for me when I first started doing development, because I assumed that most of giving was given, or most of the donations that were given by large foundations and or large corporations. And the reality is that the majority of giving is done by individuals. So this number hasn't changed that much. In fact, over the years, it's smaller now, 66% individuals. It used to be as high as 75%. But the point being is that if you really want to understand donor development, you really do have to work with people. You can't work in isolation, or you can't just work with a few tools from a foundation. You have to really understand how to communicate well with people, work with people, because that's where your donors are coming from. So if you look at this chart here, individuals make up 66%, foundations make 19%. Bequest or an estate gift is 8%, and then corporate giving is 7%, which is good news in the sense that corporate giving has definitely increased in the past 6 years or so since COVID. And we can go over that, but I think we've explained that already, that corporate giving really picked up during COVID, and it stayed up through this time period that we're in right now. Now, this is where the money comes from. Let me show you where the money goes to. 23% of it goes to religion, and that's primarily to the local church. Now, that number used to be much, much higher. It used to be almost 50%. But that's when you gave to your church, you also gave to all the other things that were going on that the church supported, like human service, like education, like healthcare. For example, if you were a part of a Methodist congregation, you probably gave a small portion of it to human service work when you made your contribution to the church. And you also made a contribution to the healthcare system. And there was a Methodist hospital in your community. And so these are the type of things that have changed over time, because now these organizations are separate 501c3s and they collect their own resources. They don't go directly through the church as much as they used to. So religion still makes up the bulk of it. 23% of all giving goes to religion, 14% now to human service. And that number has definitely grown in the past 6 years in particular, past 10 years. Education, 14%. A lot of that is made up by university giving. So it's alumni giving back to the schools that they went to. 11% gifts to grant-making foundations, which is interesting too, because what we've seen is this growth of these donor advised funds and these tools that people are using more and more as a giving instrument, because they're so effective and so easy to use. 11% to public society and benefit, and 10% to healthcare. 6% to international. That always shifts depending on where the focus is in our culture. 4% to arts and culture, 4% to individuals, and 3% to environment and animals. So it's an interesting grouping there, because as we know, quite a bit goes to both those causes People love to give to animals in particular, and they also really believe desperately in the environment. So you'll see that giving can increase, but that usually it involves a large gift of some kind. So this is where the money goes to. The trend recently, though, is this, that we're seeing this because of the work that we do, that we're seeing fewer donors. So this is from the Fundraising Effectiveness Project. And this is a report that is sponsored by the Association of Fundraising Professionals, or the AFP. And those groups, of course, exist all over the country. You probably have a chapter in your community as well. The AFP then puts out this report every year to show how giving has changed based on the trend. So this is the fourth quarter of 2025. So we had fewer donors, 3.6 donors than the year before that, but they gave 5% more. And then we had a 2% retention increase. So that's not 2% or 0.2% retention. It's an increase over the previous year. So what we're seeing is we were seeing the return of some lapsed donors, and then also an increase in giving. And a lot of it was stimulated in the fourth quarter by the government shutdown. And so those of you that work in healthcare and also work in hunger relief, you saw that the attention really focused on those two areas in particular because of the cuts that were made by the government shutdown, especially the SNAP and other benefits like that. So this is an interesting trend, but we're seeing this trend year after year, fewer donors giving more, giving larger amounts. Now, a lot of that makes sense because of the aging demographics of our country. So as baby boomers in particular go into retirement, their asset base is growing, their ability to give is more, even though they're moving to fixed income, just because of the fact the stock market has caused their assets to grow so significantly, and their use of the donor advised fund, which we mentioned last week. So just please pay attention to that. Let me show you the next slide too. We're going to talk about why research is so important. It really, really, really matters to understand what motivates a donor to give. And I say that because a lot of times we're trained in the nonprofit world to just talk about our mission. In other words, we're not good listeners all the time. We're good talkers about what we're doing, but we're not good listeners as to why the donor wants to give. So we really have learned over the years to make sure you spend time listening very carefully to what the donors want to do and why they want to do it. And so all of this is part of the research process. We do recommend you set up a really thoughtful conversation when you go to meet with a donor. And meeting with a donor is kind of essential. I don't want to belittle that in any way, because some people think if I just do good research, I can send them a letter or an email and that will be enough. But a good face-to-face conversation is always helpful because you start learning the things that motivate a donor. Or going to an office, for example. I always like going to a donor's office because what they do in their office is they set out the things that are meaningful to them. Like just even over my shoulder here, you can see I've got mugs and memorabilia that's there. A lot of it's from my grandchildren that have given to me stuff, but it's important to me, and it's there because I want to keep it as a memento to show people what's important to me personally. I have diplomas on the wall. I have other things like that that show the education or the experience that I've gone through. So it's really good when you're thinking about this. If you have a chance to meet with a donor face to face, always take advantage of that and go and spend some time asking questions and listening. It helps you define ability and affinity and access and all those type of things as well. One of the things that we have learned, and especially Vickie and I have spent a lot of time doing this, just spending a lot of time with a donor, paying close attention to what's a priority of theirs, and then also talking about how they like to give and what they like to give what format they like to use when they give. Like for example, some people want just to receive an email after you've had your conversation, and they will tell you those things. And so it's really important to tailor your message and listen to what they're talking to you about, so that you can walk away knowing more about them and less of a time spent in sales. I know it seems like this is the thing that we're trained to do the most, is be good salesmen and to go in there and talk about the features, advantages, and benefits of our organization. But what we found is the best thing to do is go in and listen and talk to your donors and spend time really understanding what's motivating them to give. Now, we're going to go through a couple other steps that we recommend, because you do want to do your homework before you go to a meeting. And what that means is there's a number of tools available to all of us that will inform you as to what the donors want to do, or how they've done it in the past. And the best indicator of a gift to your organization is a gift to another organization that's similar to yours, or a gift that's in the range that's similar to what you're looking for. So how do you find those things? Well, you go through the tools that you have available to you. Almost all of you, if you haven't, you probably should. If you're a 501c3, you are required to publish your 990s. And in that is going to have your donor list and things like that as well. So there's a lot of tools that are available for us to look through and to see what the donors are supporting. The 990s, the annual reports, go through. We even do property records that are available to us to find out what their holdings are and what people are used to giving to, and what they support in the community. Those type of things. We do a lot of work through LinkedIn, which is really the social media of business nowadays. You have to have a subscription to Candid or GuideStar, but that also is available to you if you need it through other sources. ProPublica is a source that's a little bit more available on a free basis. You can find some more information there. But it's always good to go through GuideStar and look at the profiles, especially for foundations, to find out who leads the foundation, how often do they meet, what do they give to, what is their likelihood of giving, or the amounts that they give, and those type of things. The other source that we use a lot is Foundation Directory Online. And again, that goes back to Candid and GuideStar. Those groups have come together. And so a lot of information is found in one location. And if you don't have a subscription to that, I don't want to recommend you sign up for that right away. But as you get into this work, you probably should sign up for those subscriptions to get that information on a regular basis. I also like to really encourage you to do your research just in Google. Go to Google and find out what people give to and how they give. And how you do that nowadays, again, before we used to search through keywords, but now we're really using AI as a tool. And an AI tool is more of a narrative-based account. So what you really want to do in that regard is you're going to search less on keywords and more on the narrative. For example, you might want to type into your AI tool, whichever one you're using, tell me the story of a donor that gave a significant gift to this cause. And AI will then search that out for you to find stories that are similar. It may not give you the exact donor that you're looking for, but it may give you some more information about the project itself. And so they really are wonderful tools to use. But again, their process of search is different than the old-fashioned keyword. So just keep that in mind too. These are great places to begin. This is all online. Now, what to focus on? So what we want to focus on in this regard, does it connect to our mission? In other words, look through things that are similar to what we're doing. it's one thing to search for a person who has the ability to give, but it's a totally different thing to say, I'm really looking for information on donors or foundations or individuals that give to causes like ours. Now, that is going to be an eye-opening experience for you if you just think it through. Um, does this connect to our mission is a key question because just because a donor gives doesn't necessarily mean they're going to give to your cause. For example, you may see an individual give a lot of money to their university. And you say to yourself, well, they give a lot of money to the university, they can give a lot of money to us. And the reality is, well, they may not give it all to your mission because they haven't been connected to it in any way, yet they've connected to their university for a long period of time and they have a long-term relationship with them. And so that's why they're giving there. So just because people give does not necessarily mean they will give to your mission. And that's why it's really important to pay attention to what they give to. However, you might find some people that you never even thought of before that give to a mission that's very similar to yours because of the fact if you do the research, you'll find out there's a cause for them giving to that mission, and normally it's from an individual perspective, it's personal. Something's happened in their own personal story that's caused them to give to that mission. Okay, keep in mind, we are always dealing with these four types of donors: the individual, the foundation, the corporate, and then the organization. And we'll give you some examples as we go along, but all of them require a different level of research. For example, the corporate donor, we found more and more what you really have to do when you're researching a corporate donor is understand what they're in business for. I'll give you a story about John Deere here in a second, but what we want to look at is what do they do and how do they do it, and how's their business going? How are things going? And then we also try to research, are they giving because of HR or PR, or what is the essential that's driving them back to give a gift? Foundations will be very, very specific with you. This is why we exist. This is what we want to do with the resources that we have. And this is how you apply for those resources. And so foundations are wonderful in that sense that they're very, very direct. You don't have to really guess around at a foundation. In fact, Vickie and I have been working with a particular foundation here in Texas that they're so specific that we have hit a home run 100% of the time, every time we submit a proposal, but it's because we pay close attention to what they're telling us. We don't try to convince them to change their profile. We just pay attention to who they are, what they want to do, and how they want to do it. And so we really do work hard to listen carefully and research properly in that regard. And then also outline your key identifiers for prospective donors. Interest in your work, look at geographic areas and their peer organizations. In other words, what else are they associated with? Because all of this is part of the work of doing this research. It's making sure you're paying attention to what they're doing, not trying to convince them to do something that they don't normally do, just trying to find those that are in line with your mission, and they also have the resources that they have committed to your mission or causes similar to your mission. And then you're spending time listening to them and carefully coming away, extracting as much of the details that you need before you go back and submit a proposal to them. We can go to the next slide. I think I'm going to turn that over to you, Vickie. She's going to pick it up.
Sure. Yes, thank you, Brad. So what I'm going to spend some time doing with you all now is really digging into each of the types of profiles that we have to outline today and talk about some of the priorities. Remember, we want to make sure that you're coming away with resources that are accessible to you, that do not require a subscription, and give you some best practices to be efficient in how you're using your time. So we're going to go through individual, foundation, corporate, and organization profiles. And in the resources that are available for today's webinar, I've provided a template profile for each of these types of donors. As I hope you've heard me say before, I don't hope to have all of the answers for you, but I do hope to give you a really strong foundation to take whatever it is that we're giving you. In this case, it's profile templates, and make it into your own. But it's easier to start with something from somebody else than with a blank piece of paper. So when we're thinking about individual donors, we're really focused on current residents in your community or former residents who might maintain a connection to their hometown or where their family still lives. Could be alumni if you enjoy a community that has a university presence there. Any individual that has some kind of connection to the community that you're serving. Now, individual donors are at the top of our list when we start talking about research, because having a conversation with an individual donor is the greatest opportunity to explore what motivates them to give. You're going to get the information directly from the source. It's not filtered through, maybe it's a staff member at a foundation that doesn't actually sit in on the board meetings, or maybe it's a corporate representative that's not actually a final decision maker. That's not the case with an individual donor. You're hearing directly from them what motivates them and what brings them joy. They also are more likely to be flexible in their decision-making process. So foundations and corporations often are held to some other kind of schedule or grant-making process. But an individual donor, if you represent a mission that aligns with their interests and are inspiring them through your work, they can make a decision whenever they would like to. And so there's more flexibility there. Now, when you're researching individual donors, of course, there's subscription services that you can pay for. We'll have links at the end of this presentation for some of our recommended subscription providers. But you can find plenty of information through other publicly accessible sources to help to create a robust profile. These include annual reports of other nonprofit organizations in your community. Brad mentioned property records earlier. If you look up, usually it's a good combination is the county name and appraisal district. That's the way that you can dig into county records and find out if they own multiple properties, what their property value is, and things like that. You can also tap into your current contacts to see if anybody that you currently have a relationship with might be able to fill in some details about somebody that you'd like to learn a little bit more about. And then, of course, local publications. When we have been doing research, Brad mentioned earlier, just relying on Google for a lot of this information, and we do that. And so I also want to make sure that you all know some of the tricks to getting to the information you're looking for more directly. So for example, if you're looking for a gift history for an individual, but you don't have a subscription service that's going to bring all of these different sources together for you, all you need to do is go into a search engine and type first name, a plus sign, last name, a plus sign, donation. That will bring into all of the search field that comes back. It'll give you the list of the donations that they've made that have been published at the top. So you don't have to weed through a lot of junk and get through other things just to find donations that they've made. Now, when we're creating an individual profile, we are not just simply looking for absolutely everything that we can find on someone, we're looking for the right information that helps to either bring it back to your mission or helps to inform you for a discovery conversation. So what we really want to focus on is a basic bio. Where did they work? Where did they attend school? This can help you to understand some of your contacts that you might want to tap for additional information. It could also help you to kind of understand how you might want to guide the conversation. If you know, for example, that someone attended a university and that this is actually an example of one of our clients right now, uh, a university that has provided some data and research support for a project that we're working on. You might want to make sure to go out of your way to mention that partnership in the conversation to help to reinforce the connection that you're making with that individual. You'll want to look at their giving history, benchmarking off of, what are the other organizations that they support in the community. And the reason that I like doing the search that I mentioned earlier of just looking for their name and a donation is if you're just looking in your community, you're going to be siloed only in that area. But if they are engaged in other communities, we live in a very mobile and fluid society. So, oftentimes, we're researching individuals who might have a second home somewhere else, might have business in a different state or a different part of the country. If you search for their donations, then you're more likely to find different communities that they support. And that is also very helpful information to understand what motivates them to give. You'll, of course, want to look at their volunteer and board engagement. This is also a really insightful area to learn about what inspires them to give their time and resources to. Understanding their family and peer network. So this kind of rolls back up to board engagement and employment or education. If you understand those other networks that they are part of, that can help you to kind of understand which people might you want to reach out to learn more about them. Now, a few wealth indicators, in case you do come across them, I want to make sure to point them out to you because that is always something that gives us a little bit of insight into the asset base that somebody might actually have to work with when they're considering making a contribution. If there are multiple properties, that's an indication of greater wealth. Business ownership is another one. Stock holdings. Now, many of these are most easy to find when you have one of these wonderful subscription services that are bringing all of these sources together for you. But if you come across it on your own, it doesn't matter none of us can actually do the math to understand someone else's true net worth, but it shows you that there perhaps is more that they may have available to give. Now, again, remember that we'll have individual profiles for each of these types of donors that we'll make available to you. So next up is foundation profiles. I would imagine that most of you on this call are familiar in one way or another with foundation research because it's just such an obvious source for those of us who support nonprofit organizations. We focus on foundations, of course, because they're professional funders. They exist to give away money, and they're looking to support organizations that align with their mission. Now, to do their work and to maintain their nonprofit status, they have to give away 5% of their asset base each year. So if you're researching a $100 million foundation, you know right off the bat, they have to give away $5 million each year. Now, of course, subscription services are plentiful out there to research foundations. However, in our experience, they are most useful as tools for curating a list of foundations that align with what you are looking for. But for actually doing the research and gaining insight into where they're giving, you can get all of that from 990s, which are publicly available. They're published by the IRS. A new crop comes out every single month from the IRS. Now, we're not talking about up to the minute updates by any means. We're probably doing good right now if we're starting to see 2025 990s come out. So we're always going to be on a little bit of a delay with 990s, but you can get almost all of the information that you need out of those documents. You can also reference donor listings from other nonprofits in your community or other peers in the network that you work in as a source for information for the foundations that you might want to research. Now, when we're researching foundations, this is a pretty good hierarchy of the order of information that we're looking for and how we evaluate if we're going to continue through research to create a profile for an organization. We're first going to look at their areas of interest and funding priorities and better understand if it truly does align with the mission of the organization that we're researching for. Second, we're going to look at that asset base. So there's so many foundations out there. There really are. And it is always going to be more helpful for you. Again, if you're trying to make good use of your time, you don't want to spend any time researching a foundation that might have an asset base of $100,000 when you could be researching one that has an asset base of $100 million. So you want to make sure that you are kind of right sizing for where you need to be spending your time. Next, you want to look at geographic area funded. This is a little can get a little interpretive. Some organizations are very, very focused on a set area. It might be one county, it might be one metropolitan area. Others have a little more flexibility. And when you look at their 990, you might see a lot of different communities that they support. So wanting to make sure that, again, you're investing your time in an organization that is really committed to what is going on in your community. You also want to look at the giving range. There's two different ways that you can evaluate the giving range. The first is if you are focused on a major gift campaign, like a capital campaign, you're going to want to focus on what's considered a major gift. When I look in 990s the first time, I do a really quick sweep of all of the gifts that are reported, and I kind of eyeball where do I see the larger gifts coming in. And I'll just sort of evaluate it that way. That way I know what are the major gifts that I want to actually add into my profile so that I can look at all of them together. If you have an organization that is making gifts in the range of $1,000 to $1 million, you don't want to be reporting every single one of those in your profile. So it does help to establish some kind of benchmark that you want to work towards. Now, on the flip side, if you are considering applying to an organization for the first time and you don't have a major campaign going on, you're looking for general operating support, for example, you do want to look at the entire range of what they're giving. And when you see the foundation research profile template that we've given you, you'll notice that there are going to be 3 years of giving history that we include at the end of every single one of our profiles, because we want to see who's showing up year over year, especially if you're trying to get in the first time with the foundation. Understanding what are those recurring gifts that they make every single year will help you to understand what kind of gift range you would like to consider for that first ask amount. You'll also, of course, want to take a look at trustees and staff to see if there's any connections within your own personal professional network that you might be able to tap into if you need a little bit of help getting an introduction made. Now, corporate profiles. Corporate is a little bit of a wide range. It includes large companies, small local businesses, but these are basically organizations that have a vested interest in your community and your mission. Most companies are interested in investing where their employees live, work, and play. That's why you will always hear us say, when we're talking about corporate philanthropy, that volunteerism through associates is the gateway into corporate engagement, giving them a valuable experience volunteering for your organization turns them into advocates to support your organization through corporate philanthropy. We talked about this a little bit last week, but remember that there's often multiple ways that a company might be able to give to your organization. And so when we're researching, we of course want to keep an eye out for that. We want to look for all of those different sources that they might make available. But you can also learn information about companies through your local chamber of commerce, economic development groups, local officials. Anytime a company has a website, you're very likely to find more information on the type of community engagement that they are focused on and what kind of projects they like to highlight on their website. Now, when you are doing a corporate profile, you first want to focus on what is their work, what's the industry that they work in, and what is their client base. If you've been in these sessions for a while, you probably have heard me and Brad talk about the significant work that we do in the Feeding America network of food banks. Because of that, partnering with grocery retailers is a natural partnership when we're working with a food bank organization. The retailers are in the business of feeding people, the food banks are in the business of feeding people. And so then the detail that you really have to track down is, do they have stores in your community? And that's how those things all come together. So you want to make sure that you understand the geographic footprint of the company that you're researching. And you also want to consider what, if you can learn anything through your research about their market share. You can also explore market share through discovery conversations. It's a really great way to learn something that just isn't going to be publicly available in a very clear way. But as an example, Brad and I have worked with a very, very large financial institution many times for our clients here. The financial institution is actually based in the Northeast, but they have been investing in and growing their employee base here in North Texas. So much so that North Texas has now become the second largest employee base after their headquarters in the Northeast. That meant that they were looking to make significant investments in our community because, again, that's where their employees are, and that's how they can have them engaging in the community and having a well-rounded professional environment. And again, I mentioned, you can find community engagement information through websites. They can also give you information on if they have a foundation and what those priorities might be. So organizations is the last type of profile that we'll talk about, and then we'll give you a few examples of how we've implemented all of this. This one is a little bit of a catch-all. It includes civic, fraternal, social organizations. It includes municipalities, New Markets tax credit that's issued through community development entities, which is probably an entire other presentation that Brad and I could do for you. But this is a little bit of a catch-all. It doesn't fit into a professional funder like a foundation or a corporation or an individual, but it's something else. Now, these are opportunities that really, tremendously are reliant on your network. Being ready to receive a call from someone who says, for example, in Kansas, at the end of last year, there was a fund that became available for grants to be focused on transforming rural health. Understanding who might be able to give you that information and make you aware that that huge opportunity is available is really where you're going to have a tremendous return on the investment and time that you've made in those relationships. So making sure that you're networking properly among all of these organizations will really help you when you are trying to be prepared to act on some of those opportunities. Another example is we did some work with an organization that had great relationships with the Lions Club in their community. Well, we knew from our research that the local Lions clubs were not the sole source of grants that could be available. There's actually a Lions Club International Foundation that rolls all the way up, and there's tremendous opportunity at a higher level, but it requires local endorsement and buy-in in the process. And so that is another way that research helps to guide which of these relationships you really want to be pursuing and what feels right for your organization and any program or project that you're working on. Now, you want to focus on what is their mission or their work when you're researching organizations. What is the role that they have in the community? Are they more of, from a municipality standpoint, for example, are they more focused on infrastructure investments? Or when we're talking about our friends at the Lions Club, are they focused on community engagement and how they can get their members out into the community as a representative of the Lions Club? You'll want to understand the budget that you have to work with and some of the other restrictions. Now, sometimes it's frustrating working with organizations because they cannot give you as much definition as foundations might be able to. And so that's where discovery really is important when you're developing these opportunities, but your research is going to help inform the kinds of conversations and questions that you want to ask. And also consider for organizations that this is an opportunity for a collaborative partnership. As an example, the very first project I worked in when I started in nonprofit fundraising was a public-private partnership to establish a new national memorial. There were 5 partners that were involved, each directing resources from different pots so that they could achieve a very large but shared goal together. So keep an open mind for some of these organizations because you just never know what might be available when you work together. So let's start talking a little bit about how you can implement research into all of the next steps. We're going to kind of go through a lot of different scenarios from beginning to end. The first is how to use research to find a connector to a prospective donor. So I'll give you a real quick story of an organization that we're supporting in Florida. And we were doing some research, and I kept coming across a foundation that's actually based out of Colorado, but they kept coming up for this Florida organization, and I just couldn't figure it out. So I dug into it a little bit more, pieced some things together through property records and a really solid Google search to understand that the trustees that started the foundation actually had a second home in this community in Florida and happened to be engaged in supporting a similar peer organization as our client. So we did some local research and were able to find other boards and advisory councils that they were part of. And because we had been going through this research process for all of the donors for this major project, we were able to piece together that another major donor was also engaged with a nonprofit and served on the same board as this person. And so we asked for their suggestions and how to get connected. And they said, well, just, give them a call on their cell phone and they'll answer and they'll love to hear from you. And to make an otherwise long story short, we did all of that, went to the meeting, listened very carefully, did what they asked us to do, and they are currently considering a $5 million request. Now, this is obviously it's a tremendous development. Not every relationship develops like that, but that's just a very recent and practical example from us of how we were able to implement some of these strategies that we're mentioning to you. I want to share an email outreach to you, and then I'm going to ask Brad to share a couple of examples on his mind. So this is an example email outreach where we are using the research that we found for a foundation and using it to ask for a discovery meeting. So now you can start to see how all of our different pieces from this development series are all sort of coming together. So for this email, it says, it gives a little bit of information at the top, and you'll receive all of these slides. So we don't need to go through all of this right now, but kind of lays the groundwork for what's the project that we're talking about. Now, the second paragraph is really where I want to call your attention to. It says, the Fill in the Blank Foundation has made a tremendous impact in our community through partnerships with many nonprofits. I'd love to get your guidance on a thoughtful approach to the foundation. The staff member and I would enjoy an opportunity to explore how the foundation's priorities align with the organization's mission. Now, I wanted to share this with you to encourage you to not make this more complicated than it needs to be. This is admittedly a very simple, tailored message to a foundation. What we found in our research is that they didn't have one single issue that they were supporting. We didn't have key priorities that they stated they were solely focused on. Instead, they support an entire community and support them in very dynamic ways. And so that's how we were able to tailor that very first sentence to elevate them as a partner to all of the good work going on in the community, and then a request to better understand how that might align with our client's organization. So that's a pretty simple one, but hopefully a good one for you to benchmark off of for your organization as well. Now, Brad, would you like to share some of the other examples that came to your mind about how to tailor a discovery conversation?
Yeah, so one of the organizations that we're working with is up in Iowa. And in our research, we noticed that one of the supporters, a regular supporter of that organization, was a large national corporation. And so through our research, we realized that the national corporation had made some significant gifts to another organization, not in that same community, but in a different part of the country at a very large level. And so when we went to their discovery meeting and met with them, we talked to them about making that size gift to this organization in Iowa. And they explained to us, this is how this is how that gift developed, and this is how you have to approach us if you want to see that size gift. Well, sure enough, we followed their instructions. We did all of the homework that we needed to in our discovery session. And it did turn into a seven-figure gift for this organization in Iowa because of all the work that they informed us to follow. So it was found in discovery for this. Same thing occurred, very similar organization, well, same organization actually, with another corporate donor of theirs, but it was an international corporation. And so, again, we went to a discovery meeting, and before we went to the discovery meeting, part of our research, and I would like to encourage you to do this, if you're not used to doing this, you should probably pay attention to this. You should learn how to read annual reports or quarterly reports from publicly traded companies so that you can understand what their business model is like and what they're doing and how they do it, and also how they give, because they will report all this in their quarterly reports. Now, it gets a little boring if you're not in business, but to me, it's fascinating, so I study these things. But we went to the meeting, we talked to them about how things were going for them in their market. Now, the domestic market was not that great. It was good, but it was solid, but it wasn't as good as their international market. But their international market was causing them a unique situation. Their profits were so significant that they had to figure out some giving strategies in the US as well. And so we helped them with that. And so the timing was just right on that particular request, but we were prepared through discovery to make the request at the right time. So that's the key for them, for the corporate donor, and that I wanted to share with you. Just pay attention and sometimes read things that are outside of your comfort area. Go ahead and read it. Learn how to read an annual report. Learn how to read a quarterly report so you can see how companies are doing in your market in particular. Things that Vickie already mentioned, like, for example, if you're doing a retail corporate donor,
know what their market presence is like and how they're doing in that market and how they do compared to their competition. So these are all things that are essential when you're talking to a corporate donor, because one of the things that we've learned over the years, the corporate donor that has competition locally always wants to know what are the other groups doing? So they will ask those questions. They'll ask you those questions. How much are they giving? How are they giving it? And when are they giving it? These are all things that you should be prepared for when you're doing your research and your discovery on that. So those are a couple examples I wanted to share with you as well.
Thank you, Brad.
Yeah.
We have one more example to share with you, and then we'll wrap up. So I also wanted to show you, again, this is probably going to look deceptively simple, but that is sometimes how some of these things come across in a genuine and thoughtful way. So this is a small little portion of a proposal that we wrote for a client, and this was written to our beloved HEB. If you know anything about Texans, you know that we are crazy about HEB grocery stores. We're fanatical about them and unashamed as well. Now, HEB, again, is one of those examples that we get to work with quite a bit because of our work in hunger relief. They are a grocery retailer across the state of Texas, and so whenever we can align with their growing market shares, we love to do that. So this is an example for you of how we tailored just the request portion. This is not the entire proposal by any means. We added in additional information about the things that they told us they were most interested. In this case, it was a food pantry and the outcomes that would be realized from that improvement. But wanted to share with you how we tailored the language specifically for them. So we've said, because of HEB's commitment to help every community you serve, especially in the areas of hunger and disaster relief, that comes directly from our research and what they have posted on their website. This organization respectfully requests that HEB consider a $250,000 gift over a multi-year period. Again, this is more information that we learned through research and discovery. Because of HEB's growing presence in the North Texas market, naming opportunities in this highly accessible new facility will advance HEB's brand awareness in the community. Again, we're all crazy about the store, and they're moving up to North Texas, and everyone's losing their minds. And so being able to help them to get their name out in the right places that they were interested in and aligning them with organizations that support their mission and their corporate priorities was going to be a motivator to them. We learned that both in research and in discovery. So these are some really practical examples of how you can take this and implement it. And this is not, we're not reinventing the wheel here. This is not complicated language. It is simply listening and being thoughtful in how we're responding to someone and presenting an opportunity that has been tailored for them. Now, you've been with us for plenty of these sessions, so you know that I love a good resource slide. I want to give you things that you can look at for your own organization and consider if you would like to use them. So iWave is the research subscription service that we use here at BCA. We love it, but it is a subscription-based service, so it might not be the right fit for everyone. Donor Search, Foundation Directory, Grant Station, these are all additional paid services that you could consider for your organization. Impala, Instrumental, and Zephy, to my last knowledge, they all have some sort of free access component, especially Zephy. These are also focused on foundation research. So iWave and Donor Search are going to be the options that can give you insights into all types of donors. Everything else below is really focused on foundations and research for them. So I think that is, and these are all linked in the slides that you'll receive from us. So that actually gets us to the end of our presentation for today. So I'm going to pause for a little bit and ask Carly if there's any questions that we might be able to answer.
All right. So if anyone has questions for Vickie or Brad, feel free to put those in the chat. While you all are thinking about what questions you might have, I had a thought to share, an example from my personal giving that came to mind as we were moving through today's session. And I think in particular this might be of interest to um, those looking to do donor development in super rural areas of the state. So the example that came to mind, I am from a rural Kansas county. My rural Kansas county invested in me when I was graduating high school and gave me scholarships. I think this is a really common giving strategy in our rural Kansas communities is making scholarships to students to support their education. Unfortunately, what this can sometimes mean is that then those students leave our community and don't necessarily come back. So in some ways that gift has left the community. Um, it's important to me, though I no longer live in the community that supported my education through scholarship, to give to the community that I no longer live in. My parents are still there. My nieces and nephews go to school there. And so I give, though I don't live there, to the community foundation in my rural Kansas community. So I just wanted to share that from my personal giving experience in case things like scholarship lists are a helpful place to start in prospect research for people who no longer live in your community. Now, there's probably some kind of optimal window. I'll see if Vickie or Brad have thoughts on that. But certainly 18 and 19-year-olds aren't at the point where they're able to give. But when you've invested in the education of students from your community, I think they often grow up to become professionals who have funds to give and invest philanthropically in your community. So just wanted to give that example as it came to mind for me as part of my personal giving strategy and how I think about where some of my charitable dollars go.
That's a great story, Carly, and a really wonderful reminder for that kind of other group of individual donors that someone might be looking for. It's not always the people who have property in town. It is that institutional knowledge of who used to be connected to this place. That's one of the things that we always enjoy about getting to work in a new community is we get to listen to our clients and learn about that history and try to help them figure out where there is opportunity to grow relationships.
Yeah, and I was going to add to that too, that it's a really good point, Carly, too, that there's like in our work, we can think of 3, 4, 5 different examples of people that used to live in the community that no longer live in that community, but still support that community because of their affinity for that community. So this has happened in Kansas and Minnesota. It's happened in other places as well that you'd be surprised to find out where the people now live. They don't live there anymore, but they still care very much for their hometown, their home community, and what's going on there.
Right.
So I see a question in the chat from Patty. Patty asks, for a small-ish organization, do you think the ROI for a subscription to iWave or Donor Search is justifiable?
I don't myself. I would hold off until you had a need for that. However, you may be able to find someone, a consultant or somebody who has a subscription that you could pay them for that service, and or I don't think your library will have that for iWave in particular. In fact, I know they won't. But you may find a local consultant that may have that ability to do that for you.
And Brad, speaking of libraries, Karen said the library in Topeka has a foundation center with many subscriptions to services. Maybe others do as well. Is that common in your experiences that some libraries have access to some of the donor tools you've shared here today?
Yes, especially Foundation Directory Online, which is what we use a lot. There used to be a published a manual every year. They would publish this. It would be in your library. And so what's happened is the local libraries have then signed up for that online service. And so you can find this in some libraries. I want to say every one, but Topeka doesn't surprise me. Some of the bigger towns may have that as well, but it's a good place to go. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Several people in the chat are affirming other Kansas towns that whose libraries have access to some of those subscriptions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would definitely start there. The old school way, we used to do it the old way. We'd go to those foundation directories, and again, they were big, thick volumes that were published every year. Then we go back and keep in mind too, the data inside of those is going to be old. So it's all based on 990s. So it's keep in mind if you publish a 990, like this year, 2026, you're publishing the information from 2025. And then if it gets into print and it goes into a book somewhere, it's going to be 2 years old. If it's online, it's going to be more recent. So if you can find an online version of that, that's the better.
Well, I don't see any other questions in the chat at this time. If you still have a question, it's not too late. Go ahead and drop that in. But while you're thinking of those final questions, I was going to just pop up onto the screen this final reminder slide about the Donor Development Accelerator Grant opportunity. Again, the purpose of these grant dollars is to give you some flexible funding to be experimental with some of the strategies that we covered over the course of this virtual learning series. Those grants are due next Tuesday, May 5th. So saying that just one more time at the end of the webinar to make sure that May 5th is circled on your calendar. Many of you have started applications in our online grant management system. Please make sure you go back in, dot I's, cross T's, and hit submit by that May 5th deadline. And then we will have funding announcements made on or before June 30th. So aim to get these turned around relatively quickly so that you can jump into this work while the information is fresh in your mind. That's all from me today. I do see that Kelly has just added to the chat a resource, the Nonprofit Explorer tool from ProPublica, which is a great source for newer 990s if you find yourself looking for more of those when you're doing your prospect research. Here's our contact information at the Sunflower Foundation. That's all from us today. Thank you, Vickie and Brad, for joining us and for your deep expertise and knowledge on this topic. Thank you all for taking the time to join us over your lunch. And we look forward to, we'll keep an eye out for grant applications for the Donor Development Accelerator opportunity here in the next week or so. Thank you so much, everyone, and we'll see you next time.